Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Sam with Historic Travels, and as always, before we get started today, I'd just like to take a quick moment to welcome all my new subscribers and to thank everybody who's been leaving me comments and messages down below. Thank you guys, I really appreciate it. And, well guys, listen, it's official. Spring is officially here. I know spring's been around for a little while at this point, but I count the day that spring is here on the day that I can't stop sneezing. I mean, seriously, no joke, guys. There is so much wind and so much pollen in the air, and like all these flowers are like blowing pollen everywhere. It's absolutely killing me. So if I sound a little stuffy in this video, or you notice my nose is kind of red, yeah, I've been having a rough day. It's finally calmed down a little bit, but yeah, when springtime comes, I can't stop sneezing. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but it's pretty rough. All right, now on to today's topic. This video is going to be another what if discussion video. One question that I get asked a lot in my comments section is, would it have been possible after the Titanic had struck the iceberg for the Titanic to actually sail and get to a rescue ship in the early stages of the sinking? So like essentially like after the Titanic hit the iceberg, could the ship have essentially tried to travel the distance and get to another vessel before the ship went down? And believe it or not, this theory isn't as crazy as you might think.
The first thing we need to talk about, though, discussing this whole idea of the Titanic reaching another ship before it went down, is the time frame at which such an attempt would even be possible. You see, the only window that the people on the Titanic would have had to attempt such a maneuver would be right after the iceberg impact. I'm talking 30 minutes to an hour post-iceberg impact, while the ship was still more or less stable. Anytime after this, the bow would have been down so low in the water that any attempt to reach another ship would have most likely ended in disaster.
So you see, just that little bit of information that I just disclosed already proves why trying to take the Titanic and drive it to another ship wouldn't be a good idea that night. See, the big reason is it took the crew on the ship about an hour to figure out that the Titanic was sinking. So in that time frame that they were trying to figure out what was going on, they lost their window of opportunity to even attempt to drive the Titanic to another vessel. By the time they started evacuating the ship was already so far gone that any attempt to move the vessel would have just made the situation 1,000 times worse.
And believe it or not, we even have a real-life example that we can use to prove why moving the Titanic after it sunk for over an hour would be a terrible idea. I am referring to the ship Britannic, which is, ironically enough, the Titanic's sister ship. You see, the Britannic struck a mine, and as it was going down, the captain noticed that they were very close to an island. So he attempted to move the ship and tried to beach the vessel, thus keeping the Britannic from sinking. However, the Britannic was already so low in the water that the forward motions of the ship only accelerated the spread of water throughout the hull, thus greatly accelerating the sinking. You see, when you have a big vessel and you attempt to move it and it's flooding, you increase the water pressure on the damaged areas, thus allowing more water to come inside the hull. And also don't forget that due to the way that the Britannic was sinking, it sunk very similar to Titanic, the propellers would be coming out of the water, as you can see in this animation, thus reducing the efficiency of the engines and greatly slowing down the speed at which the Britannic could travel. So if they would have attempted to move the Titanic when it was in a similar state to Britannic, we would have seen a very, very similar result. And honestly, I believe the Titanic would have went down in less than half the time.
Alright, so now that we've talked about why the Titanic trying to reach another vessel the night of the sinking would have been more or less impossible given the circumstances that the crew found themselves in after the ship struck the iceberg, let's now jump to the hypothetical world here, and let's talk about what if the crew actually knew the Titanic was sinking right after the iceberg impact. You know, what if they were like, okay, we already know what's going to happen, the ship's going to sink, let's try and sail the Titanic to another ship and get there before it goes down, while we still have this very narrow window of time before the Titanic became critically unstable. What might have happened to the Titanic if they would have attempted such a maneuver?
And you see, there is also some evidence to back up the claim that the Titanic could actually proceed under its own power briefly after the iceberg impact. You see, what most people don't know is a couple of minutes after the ship hit the iceberg, the Titanic did move on under its own power for roughly 10 minutes or so after the iceberg impact while the crew were still carrying out inspections. However, once they saw the damage was so severe and that the forward motion of the Titanic was increasing the flooding throughout the hull, they did turn off the Titanic's engines and allow the ship to drift to a halt.
So now that we've established that it would be theoretically possible for the crew to indeed try to drive the Titanic to another vessel if they proceeded immediately post-iceberg impact, the big question now is, where would the Titanic attempt to go? because obviously you have a giant hole or a bunch of small holes along the bottom part of the hull. You are flooding, and you have a very narrow margin of time to even attempt to move the vessel. Where would you try to take the Titanic? Because remember, you are in the middle of the North Atlantic.
Well, if I was the captain of the Titanic and I had decided to try this risky maneuver, I would attempt to drive the Titanic towards the mystery ship that was spotted during the sinking. You see, for those of you who don't know, a mysterious ship was spotted roughly 10 miles or so away from the Titanic during the evening the ship went down. It was so close, in fact, and they could see the ship so clearly that a bunch of people in the lifeboats actually tried to row to this ship. So this vessel seems like the logical place to try to take the Titanic if you were going to attempt to move the vessel after it struck the iceberg.
There's been a lot of debate in recent years over the actual identity of this mystery ship that was spotted that night. I'm under the impression that it was the Californian, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. I have other videos that discuss that topic if you're curious. So let's talk about, though, what it would mean to try to drive the Titanic towards that mystery ship. Well, number one is exactly how far away is this vessel? You see, even though you could see the vessel very clearly, there was a mirage effect going on that night that was screwing with the light and the way people could see things in the air that night. So even though this vessel looks like it's only 10 miles away, it could in fact been much further away than people thought. So you're trying to drive your damaged vessel towards this mystery ship, and it doesn't look like you're getting any closer. All the while you're putting more and more water inside the hull due to the forward motion of the ship. So that doesn't seem like a good idea to me. And number two, you also have to think about other hazards that are in the area, because you got to remember, the Titanic just struck an iceberg. And they actually had reports that there was field ice in the area which the Titanic hit the berg. We do know the Californian, the rumored mystery ship, encountered this ice because the captain of the Californian, whose name was Stanley Lord, actually decided to stop his ship for the night because he deemed it too dangerous to proceed. So if people actually did try to drive the Titanic towards this mystery ship, they would have had a lot of things they had to deal with just to even attempt to make this crazy idea work.
This map does a really good job at showing the Titanic's position in relation to other vessels that were in the area that night. So as you can see, the Californian and the Titanic are located at the top of this map, and you can see that the Californian is roughly 10 to 20 miles away. But you can see very close to these two ships is a huge patch of field ice. So if the Titanic had indeed tried to sail to the Californian post-iceberg impact, not only would they have to guess the distance of the Californian, they also would have had to deal with all of this field ice that was in the area.
So yeah, in conclusion, trying to move the Titanic towards that mystery ship post-iceberg impact would have been a terrible idea, and it's a really good thing they did not try to do it. I mean, even though the Titanic lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes after the iceberg impact, that was it just sitting idle. Think about how much time they may have lost just trying to move the ship forward to reach this mystery ship. And also think about the time they would have lost in actually launching the lifeboats. You can't launch a lifeboat while the Titanic is in motion, so they wouldn't have been able to do that. They definitely made the right call by keeping the Titanic idle, that's for darn sure. Because if they would have attempted to move the ship, I don't see any way that could have worked out in favor for the crew on board the Titanic the night she went down. Anyway guys, that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. And yeah, we just did another what if discussion video. I love doing these videos because it really forces you to think outside the box. And as I was concluding this video, I had one other idea that I wanted to run past you guys. I've actually briefly discussed this idea in some of my live streams before. So what do you guys think of this? And please let me know in the comment section. The biggest threat to moving a ship forward after it's been damaged, like if it's been damaged in the bow section and you want to move it forward, the biggest problem with that is the increased water pressure at that front section of the ship where the damage is. So how about this instead? What if we ran the ship backwards? So the damage is at the front, and you tell the engines to move the ship and pull it in reverse, and that's how you try to drive it to another location. Because theoretically, you wouldn't increase the pressure on those sections at the front of the ship, so you may actually be able to drive the ship in reverse without accelerating the sinking. Like, theoretically. I mean, my gut tells me that's the wrong thing to do, and that's a bad idea and it wouldn't work. But at the same time, I don't logically see a reason why that would accelerate the sinking. I mean, I guess there would always be some increase in pressure there, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as bad as if you were driving the ship forward. So I don't know. I don't think it's the right thing to do, but I don't have a reason to hate the idea. So anyway, just let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. All right, everybody. Well, hey, thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe, please like, and do all that good stuff. You guys are awesome. And yeah, all right, everybody. Well, hey, you all stay safe out there, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Have a good night, everybody.